Welcome. You know the story, right? The sudden, sometimes intense conflict that can show up when a child hits their teenage years. But is it really just a phase they have to go through? Today, we're going to dig into the research to understand these conflicts in a totally different way. Not as simple rebellion, but as a really complex process happening within the entire family system. And it's a process that absolutely requires a more culturally aware approach. Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start by rethinking what adolescent conflict even is. Then, we're going to talk about why it's so critical to look past a purely Western lens. After that, we'll zoom out and look at the family as a whole system that's in transition. We'll also see how this conflict can actually be a chance to build skills, and we'll wrap up with some really specific, practical protocols for practitioners who are right there on the front lines. For so many parents and caregivers, let's be honest, the teenage years can feel like you're walking through a minefield. The communication that used to be so easy suddenly feels completely strained, and you can just feel the frustration building on both sides. And this scenario, it is just so incredibly common. The kid who used to be this open book, connected, now just gives one-word answers. It can feel like a switch just flipped overnight, and of course, parents are left wondering, what did I do wrong? And here's the other side of that coin, right? It isn't always just pulling away. A lot of times it's active conflict over what seems like the smallest things. This breakdown in communication can just lead to sky-high frustration for literally everyone involved. So here's the big question we have to ask. Do we just chalk this all up to teenage rebellion? Well, the research is pretty clear that that's way too simple. To really get what's happening, we've got to dig a lot deeper into the assumptions we're all making about this stage of life. All right, so how do we start building a more complete picture? Well, a huge blind spot in how we often think about this is our own cultural perspective. A lot of the common wisdom out there is really rooted in a very specific Western way of looking at the world. And this slide really puts it front and center. The standard Western model basically assumes that conflict is all about the teenager fighting for more independence. But from a clinical perspective, this view can be totally inappropriate, even harmful, for families from different cultural backgrounds where ideas about family duty, obligation, and interdependence are just valued differently. And this quote from Garcia Prieto just nails it. Trying to apply this one-size-fits-all Euro-centric model isn't just ineffective, it can cause real damage. To actually be helpful, practitioners have to understand the conflict within its own cultural context, not try to force an outside one onto it. Okay, so if it's not just about the teen pushing back, what else is going on? This is where looking at things from a systemic point of view is absolutely essential. The adolescent isn't changing in a vacuum. The entire family is often going through this profound intergenerational shift all at once. Look at this timeline. It shows you just how dynamic this is. Right as the child is becoming an adolescent, their parents are often hitting middle age themselves. They're grappling with career pressures, their own aging parents, and shifting identities. And at the exact same time, the grandparents might be transitioning into retirement. The entire system is trying to find a new balance. And all of these shifts create all these different stress points. I mean, you've got the massive changes happening for the teen, of course. But then you also have these intense, often conflicting demands on parents in midlife. They're trying to balance work, their own health, and care for both their kids and their own parents. Then you throw in a major school transition for the teen, and boom, you have a perfect storm for tension in the system. But here's the really powerful reframe in all of this. This period of intense conflict doesn't have to be just destructive. In fact, it's a critical opportunity for the whole family, and especially the adolescent, to develop the essential life skills they need to navigate disagreements in a healthy way. Research from Risch and their team highlights this key disconnect. When there's a conflict, teenagers tend to see it as their parents' fault. Parents, on the other hand, often see the exact same fight as a teachable moment. And if you don't have a shared way of solving problems, both sides just end up stuck in their own corners. So how do you bridge that gap? Well, it's all about creating a flexible family environment. What does that mean? It means parents stay involved and responsive, even when it's really hard. It means staying supportive. It means having realistic, age-appropriate expectations. And maybe most importantly, it means actively teaching skills like constructive communication and mutual responsibility. And you know what? The family isn't the only player here. For a teen who's going through all this turmoil at home, the school environment, teachers, counselors, coaches, can be this incredibly important protective buffer. It can be a space that offers stability and support when everything at home feels chaotic. And that puts school practitioners in a really unique and really critical position. Okay, and that brings us to our final section, which is where the rubber really meets the road. How do we take all this systemic understanding and turn it into practical, real-world support? We're going to focus on specific protocols for school-based practitioners because they're often the first responders when an ongoing conflict suddenly blows up into a crisis. And we have to be clear here. The stakes are incredibly high. The natural increase in risk-taking behavior during these years means that arguments about freedom and safety can spiral out of control really, really fast. A fight over a curfew can suddenly turn into a dangerous situation, and that transforms chronic family conflict into an acute emergency. And a statistic like this from the CDC is just sobering, especially when you think about how many conflicts are about independence and things like driving. Teen drivers are 4 times more likely to crash per mile than older drivers. This isn't just some theoretical risk, it's a real-world danger that just highlights how urgent it is to have effective prevention and, when you need it, immediate crisis intervention. So, what does a practical support protocol actually look like in a school? Well, it has to be multi-layered. First up, right after a crisis, the number one priority is triage support, providing a safe space, de-escalating the situation. Okay, once things have come down, the work shifts to facilitating communication skills for the long haul. But we can't just be reactive. The third layer is preventative curriculum, things like school-wide assemblies or workshops for parents to build skills before a crisis happens. And finally, the fourth layer is proactive outreach, things like conducting family checkups during those really high-stress times, like the transition into high school, to offer support before conflicts can even boil over. And this really leaves us with the most important question of all. I mean, stepping in during a crisis is vital, but the real goal has to be moving upstream. How can we, as parents, as practitioners, as a community, help build the communication skills and the flexible environments that create truly resilient family systems? Families that are actually capable of navigating the turbulent but also transformative waters of adolescence together.